Morning, everybody. Do you want to grab your coffee or in your seat so we can get started? We are pleased today to welcome Sherry Bridges, who's going to give us a board update and I think some information on the transitional minister search. So Sherry is filling in today for Alyssa, or however that name is pronounced. I always get it wrong. So she will be at the podium taking questions and excuse me. And I still Meredith will take questions online. So put your questions in the chat if you would, and I'll turn it right over to Sherry. We have information here on the budget, and I can pass these out if anyone needs one and hasn't gotten one yet. So now let's turn it over to Sherry.
Thank you, Sally, and we were wishing Elisa could make it today, but she had been off on a trip somewhere and missed the flight and won't get in until this afternoon. So we just wished her safe travels. And as I told my friends, I was wishing that I had some terribly contagious disease, because the last thing I wanted to do this morning was to stand up here and do Elisa's job, which she does so capably. The handout that you have with our operations budget report for this third quarter, and as you can see, we're tracking well in all areas and are expecting to finish the year in a sound way. That's about all I can tell you. One of the changes that we made last fall was Peter's offer to reduce his position to 0.8, which made a big difference in our budget. That was very helpful. He also has been very frugal with his other expenses, which was helpful. We had budgeted $10,000 for his relocation, and it came in under that. So there were several areas. I don't think that all of our snow plowing expenses are in here yet, and this has been a hard winter for that, as well as shoveling the roof. So there've been a few extras here and there, but we've been trying to smooth that across. Russ is here and Sarah should be somewhere. And we have some other board members from the audience too that can answer questions that have also been part of finding the process. I don't see Giger, so maybe she's online. So do you have any specific questions budget-wise with this current year's operating budget? No questions? Oh, that's lovely. Jane. Sure. And I apologize, I forgot to bring the computer, so we don't have slides for the folks online, but I'll make up for that by printing this in the Connect in the coming week. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, I'll speak loud. I'm questioning, we're budgeting more for the ministerial staff next year, but I thought that we were looking at getting a contract person on that.
A contract person simply means that we're in a pool of people that are looking at less than a full-time position. In November of 2022, the UUA had done a full review of staff compensation across the country and modified guidelines for appropriate salaries to pay people based on a much smaller list of positions. It's more of a matrix now. And the board made a decision that we could not afford to reach that level immediately, that it would take us 2 years to get there. We were at the midpoint of the recommended salary ranges previously. And so we're committed to going in that direction, but it'll take us a little time. And for the coming year, a contract minister is a year-to-year contract. it's a little different than an interim minister because they can repeat consecutive years, whereas an interim minister is limited to 2 years. And our congregational record, which was submitted to the UUA and is published, and we're looking at a couple of candidates at the moment, calls for anything between 0.5 and a 0.8 position. And much of that is dependent on our budget, but also on what the candidates bring to us. And if the right candidate is requesting a 0.5, then we would seriously look at that and see what the lay membership could do to cover the other areas or hire other people in the community to cover whatever is not taken care of. Meredith. Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a question from Kathy Helzer about the pledge drive update. And how many giving units are there and how many have made a pledge? How many giving units, in quotes, and how many have made a pledge?
I don't have my notes with me, but I believe that we have 54 giving units and the total pledges now are just a little over 150,000. So we have a ways to go.
But kind of a general question. I've heard that we really can't afford to hire a minister for the coming year or on a full-time basis. And if that's the case, don't we have to relook at the budget for the church and kind of determine maybe we need to increase the pledges or what's happening there? And I don't want to put you on the spot with specifics, but just generally speaking.
Well, the board and the finance council both in tandem have been looking at that carefully for quite a long period of time. And it's clear that we don't have the budget at the moment for a full-time minister. According to all the other staff, we're still working on next year's budget. There are several areas that are not yet well defined. And so it's kind of like a we'll cinch things in a little and look at different ways we can deliver our message and still create a strong liberal voice in this community. But yes, unfortunately, we don't have the means to do a full-time minister at this time.
Sherry, could you speak up a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's
Sherry,
always,
I'd like to add too that Kathy Stinnett said that the majority of the pledges that have come in have been increased. You know, there is this cost of living increase and recession that's happening. So people have increased their pledges. We've also gone to a credit card option and people have increased their pledge to cover that credit card cost. But what we're finding is there are more people who are interested in doing their pledging that way. So we're constantly looking at ways that we can do small changes to increase the financial picture.
other questions? I'm sorry, Jane, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I think you already talked about so I'm not sure if I heard what you were saying. I think it's my problem, not yours. The 119,000 that's budgeted for the minister, for what would be a contract minister, that is for what percentage of time?
Right now, that's budgeted at 0.8. Very
Which is the
likely.
same as what we've got now.
Yes, but that includes everything. That's salary, housing, all the benefits.
Benefits,
So,
okay.
all put in one line.
Is there, has there been discussion of reducing the amount of time if necessary? I mean, is there a minimum amount of time where for a contract minister?
0.5 is generally a minimum. And so, and that could be viable. I'm attending a seminar in a couple of weeks called Part-Time is Plenty. So churches around the country are facing similar situations. You're still not hearing me, so sorry. But a lot of local communities are facing these challenges too, and looking at different ways of blending congregations, making other cuts. And so I'm so sorry Elisa isn't here. She would answer these questions much better.
You're doing a great job.
So, okay. Peter.
For pretty much a decade, this congregation has had some people speaking in favor of less than full-time or no minister in our paid staff arrangement. I wonder, and I'm pretty sure you have learned a lot because you've been a marvelous person digging deep to try to make these things work. Halftime person would really somewhat be subject to on-call all the time, right? I mean, there's things within the sorts of things that a minister does with a congregation, even if they are at halftime and something happens, then they would be subject to being active in the moment. Is that true or not true?
I can't say that that's totally true. I think that would depend on the contract that we write. And for example, we might get a minister that mostly does preaching and teaching. We might need to find pastoral care elsewhere. And some of the emergencies to which you might be referring could be under pastoral care. But that's something the board will have to look at very carefully with the contract.
So I would suggest that the board engage somehow with the broader congregation to get a sense, like you're doing right now, by the way, so it's not intended as a negative at all, but that we try to get the pulse of the congregation today. It is a dynamic. I mean, we are not who we were even a year ago in terms of people in our midst. And so if we can make some effort to get to know ourselves in a friendly and energizing way and find out what the priorities might be beyond the knowledge that the board itself or the general sense that the board has of what its priorities would be.
I'll share that with the search committee. We're meeting on Monday again, and putting together some sort of an online survey is not that difficult. That might be helpful to us. We spent a lot of time writing what's called the congregational record. And that was reviewed by all of the board. And we tried to define our needs for the future, but it's very negotiable. I'm not one that is greatly fond of what's the word I want? Yeah, never mind.
Surveys.
Flew out of my head.
We all have that.
Yeah.
I have a creative mind, so I just wanted to share with you that I had a chance to go to the mosque for their dinner. And John Dahl was a member of this congregation. His daughter is actually graduating, and we have a quilt for her this year. He is now the president of the mosque. And if you guys remember Jerry Chalman, he always said, we should share this building with another faith community that doesn't worship on Sunday morning. So I planted that seed with John Dahl because they bought the Winona Church building. And of course, they need to put a new roof on, and they got money for a security system. And I said, hey, just think about it. What would that be like to have the mosque congregation worshiping here at UUCD? So we are leaving no stone unturned when it comes to looking at creative financing and continuing to do everything we can as a board to provide a robust financial picture for you, and that's where we need you. And, you know, talking to your friends to say, what can we do to increase our pledges? So we appreciate all that you do for that.
Kathy?
Speaking of the kind of sharing that Barb just mentioned, some of us are reading Mistakes and Miracles. Excuse me, it's a fabulous book about 5 different congregations across the country. One of them in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where in 1921, you all maybe know this, white people went in and completely destroyed what was known as Black Wall Street. They killed, they burned, they did everything to eliminate the successful and productive Black community there. So I was really surprised to have read this part of the book where inevitably the All Souls UU congregation in Tulsa ended up combining with the Black church. And I am absolutely fascinated by this concept, and for Barb to mention the possibility of using this building on other days. It's awe-inspiring to me to think that we could come up with some really great ideas. And we don't even have to read a book to come up with them.
This is going back a little bit to the conversation about the full-time minister. Question from online, kind of a rhetorical question or comment, but do we think most folks actually know what a full-time minister does?
Okay, I see several people in my audience who've been presidents of this congregation before, so you can help me out on this. The minister, generally a settled, well, I think always a settled minister has a letter of call that is very clear about what their obligations are to the congregation. They're called by the congregation. Preaching, teaching, pastoral care, and outreach in the community are the 4 areas that I would define. Supervising the staff is part of an administrative role that the head of the church always has as well. Anything further? So some of that we're going to have to be delegated elsewhere if we have a part-time person. Anybody else want to add to that? Really?
One thing I think that we should, I don't know if it gets considered or not, but it should be the responsibility, or we should look when we're recruiting a new minister, I think, to find somebody that has the ability and skills to help us grow the congregation. It seems like that would be just like any other CEO of a corporation, or, you know, there's responsibility to draw in more membership, and I think we have to kind of consider that.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Hi, this is Blanche Ebert. I just want to follow up on what you said. When considering a minister, I think the preaching aspect is kind of a traditional moniker, but I think it's really powerful in terms of growing a congregation, attracting new families. What happens on Sunday morning if people are exploring or considering, if you have a talented, vibrant minister who engages people, I think that is really important and part of growing our membership.
Thank you. If I wrote something for the Connect this week because I was asked to do a testimonial, and I talked about a poster I had seen at St. Paul's Episcopal many years ago after attending a meeting there. And the theme was taking Sunday's worship into Monday's world. And that's what this is all about. And I'm so very sad that Peter is leaving, because I think he has been inspiring us to do that. And we have a great many congregational lay members who do that as well. Taking Sunday's worship into Monday's world. There's so much hurt, there's so much mess out there that we're doing our darndest to work on. And we need a minister who really inspires and encourages us to do that in our own ways. And as a corporate body, we can accomplish so much more than individual. So that's the kind of person we want. Jane?
I should maybe know the answer to this, but is there a way that we can look at the congregational record that you submitted?
I'll ask the board about that.
I mean, I guess you piqued my interest when you talked about spending a lot of time defining who we are and yada, yada. I mean, it would be good maybe for us to be able to read that.
Sure, I edited what we had from last year, which was a good starting place, and I provided a portion of that to the finance council that wanted to know more about the attributes we're looking for in investing. Most of it is geographical, talking more. Right, yeah, those could definitely be shared.
Hey there, thank you, Sherry, and I'm sorry Elisa isn't here either for finance, but can I address what was in our bulletin in May? Did anybody look at these numbers? I've been accused of being a Pollyanna before, but it says fiscal year-to-date March budgeted income 245, 245,000, and actual income we've taken in 310,000. I mean, and then it also said budgeted expense, we thought we need 264,000. And what we really spent was actual expense was 247,000. So we budgeted higher, we spent less. We projected that we get so much and we got more. So I just want to say that. I just attribute our leaders and our congregants. Thank you guys. Addendum to what Kathy said, this Mistakes and Miracles book, just read chapter 5. It's amazing. And if you wanted to watch the movie Come Sunday, because that's the story of why this Black minister lost his church, his following, because he adopted more UU values, and the UU minister approached him. That's not touched in the movie. It just comes on as an addendum at the end. But if you want to hear what Kathy was talking about, read chapter 5 in our book, which, by the way, we meet Tuesday at 6:30. You are welcome to join online, the links in the Connect. Sorry, I'm monopolizing here. And the last thing I want to say is I think the youth program, the religious ed program, a vibrant leader in that area of our ministry really brings in new families. And I, as a congregant, was devastated when Jessica Salzman, what was her name, left. Remember, she was vibrant. Everybody thought she was wonderful. I was devastated. I thought, oh man. And then we got Katie. So yes, I'm sad we're losing Peter, but man, I hope history repeats itself.
I'm always an advocate for thinking outside the box and looking for just thinking freely. However, having done some of that, we balance our budget in large part because we already share our space with another organization. And so the University Nursery School in many ways uses about half of our square footage. They are based in the East Wing, but they also use the kitchen area throughout the week. we have experienced some constraints because of that. If we take in another congregation, we have a history of sharing, being the sharer with an Episcopal congregation about 25 years ago. And then more recently Pilgrim. It's an interesting idea, but if it became, our building was 2/3 shared with others and 1/3 for us, how would that work well for us? I'm just asking. It's not an insignificant thing to think about. In my life.
I just wanted to point out too, Peter has been, I think, a great interim. And how critical an interim is. When Sherry told me that the current protocol is 2 years of interim, I was really surprised because the previous recommendations were 1 year. But when I think about Peace Congregation, Pilgrim Congregation, First Lutheran, the struggle that they have had following a minister that was there for 10+ years, like we've had, how critical that is. So I'm just so grateful that Peter has been here, that the search team was able to find him and get him hired. And what he's given us has given us such a great stepping off place. Also, the crazy thing about budgets, because I've been on the board for a few years, I actually run kind of a personal small business. And even though we think math is 1 + 1 = 2, budgets, especially congregational budgets, are fluid. So if we come to you at the annual meeting over budget and under pledged, know that it's a lot of effort, but a lot of people do rally around that and do additional kind of pledging things, matching things. And so be open to that. Be open to increasing your pledge if you can. Be open to doing some matching stuff. Be open to working with, if you want to do a testimonial like Sherry did. I haven't done it because that's not a gift area of mine, but it is of some of yours. So if you can do a Facebook post and those kinds of things, we're all in the pledging opportunity together. And we do come through our budget, sadly, sometimes the staff member does step away and that does catch our budget up. There's all kinds of things. And Therese is working with that interim team, if we don't have a full-time minister, to be able to set up those Sunday services. Am I right on that? Right, but we know within you guys, though, there are speakers.
Here I am, this is the side to Pollyanna. I really respect all the learning and teaching that ministers go through. I don't think I can step up and be a part-time minister. Yeah. Anyway, oh God.
But together.
How do you really feel about it?
Yeah.
I'm curious about the giving units. I don't know if you have this, but I think it said 54. And so I'm wondering how that aligns with previous years. Are we gaining, are we losing?
We have a ways to go. I think last year there were about 130 gigabytes. Does that seem?
That's all.
Yeah, 130.
And we have a couple of weeks left.
Mhm. And some people historically make their gifts later in the year. I don't know if some of those have already pledged, but there will be calls to people. Some individuals who have not yet pledged should have received a letter in the mail this week, encouraging them to do so.
Can you remind us who is on the interim team?
The search,
Kathy Helser.
Okay.
the interim team right now includes myself, David Rodwell, Elisa DeRider, and Jen Sites. And we report directly to the board. A contract or an interim minister is hired solely by the board, whereas a settled minister is hired by the congregation. And one clarification I want to be very clear about is that we are going in under the contract ministry umbrella, because that's where we have to be since part-time position. but we're still asking for interim work. And we have budgeted funds for that individual to take the interim training if they do not already have that. We feel that there is still work to be done in digging deep and looking at some of the areas where this congregation can improve and can grow. We did an analysis of our pledging earlier this year, Shirley, and I went through all of the gifts. And there are some real strengths about our giving. But one of the downsides is that 77% of our operating budget comes from people who are retired. That's got to change. It's not sustainable.
Can I ask a question about the interim training? What does that, do you know what that involves and how is that unique from regular minister work?
I'm not an expert on that. Jane, do you remember some from reading our book?
I don't know that I've ever read a description of it. You know, what was involved, I believe it's like a week long in August. So it's not a surfacey kind of thing. But interim work is fairly well defined as a specialty, I think. In terms of the kind of skills that it takes in terms of helping our congregation learn about who they are and where they are, and those kinds of issues rather than a settled minister. Does that make sense?
An interim or a contract minister in this case has the ability to be very candid because they are probably not here for the long term. They can tell us things we may not want to hear.
And Peter took the interim training because he had never been an interim minister before. You just take it, you know, the first time before you become an interim minister.
Just wondering if it's worth the money, quite honestly, you know what I mean?
What is that?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the skills of the person.
One of the things, would you like to ask your question first?
Well, I was gonna change the subject, so.
Oh, well, let me just jump in with one clarification. The contract ministry has one advantage. If we get a minister that we absolutely love and they absolutely want the UUCD, we can repeat year after year. And when we have the funds to go full time, there's a process called contract to call. And the congregation could call that individual. So that's not the case with interim. No matter what miracles we could have brought to keep Peter here, we could not have called him.
That's too bad.
I know, I agree.
Can we fix that going forward?
We wish.
Like rent to own, like.
You got it.
Yes.
Stay here and leave and come.
Sure. No one ever shuts the door on a really good person. Oh.
Giger and then Kathy. Oh, I'm sorry, you're first.
So I probably should know this, but I don't, but given the total pledging units that we think we should have, and given the total budget that we want to raise, what does that come out to as what the average pledge would need to be?
Okay, board members, remember when Sarah came up with that? If we average pledges across the board, which we don't do, but I think it's only 2,000. Yeah.
You divide that 350,530 units, that would give you that, yes.
What we know though about pledging is that, you know, the law of thirds, I think, applies to just about everything. So a third of the pledgers, you know, are going to be on the low end, a third of the pledgers are going to be on the high end, and then a third of them are going to be in the middle. So that, you know, so you can do the math, but of course it's not ever going to be that way, you know, but that just gives people a place, the guideline that they have in there, I think is really helpful for people to kind of look at, think about.
This is my very own comment, not from online. This is Meredith. I really appreciate the fair share guideline that's out there so that maybe a third sounds really good. And as an individual, it's helpful to look at that.
Are there any other questions? Peter had a question and Kathy knows.
I was just gonna ask you to fill in the spectrum. You talked about the ease of retaining a contract minister. What's the ease or difficulty if we feel less than optimistic about that person's fit for us?
If we do not have a good fit, the board should be aware of that by no later than March of the year, so that that person can go back into the pool to look for a different congregation. So the first 6 months are critical. Kathy?
Mary, I'm thinking that, like myself, who doesn't, I don't get a chance to read everything that comes out from our press, but I think this information about the definition of an interim might need to be repeated or oft times repeated for folks to catch, because the whole concept that, from what I've been understanding, is that the interim is here to kind of help fix ourselves. Is that correct? In a way, to fix what they can clearly see might need to be fixed. Or that's not the best definition maybe, but maybe that's the bottom line. And so I'm thinking that it would behoove us to help our fellow congregants understand the role of an interim, because I think it'd be really easy for people to say, why are we messing with an interim? Let's just get another minister and be done with this.
Well, yeah, as we see in Duluth, that doesn't work well. You know, the major congregations that are sort of our liberal group of people, they've really struggled with finding a new settled minister. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. The labor market too is really, really tough.
And so if, and something that I didn't know until being on the board is that there aren't a lot of candidates right now. The reason why I think isn't contract ministry sort of a new category, or has it always existed? It's the first I heard of it this year, thanks to, Sherry searches all the UUA stuff and reads it, and she's awesome and stellar at doing that kind of stuff. But they're trying to come up with more and more ways to help congregations get the ministry that they need. And so, and the interim process, there was questions about it before. Peter had some of those meetings and some of you were invited to some of those. So one thing is actually looking at a timeline. Where were we? What have we done? Where do we want to go? Those kinds of things, just to really ask and reflect. So I think I wasn't sold on interim work before, but now I understand the value of it. It's kind of like jumping from one relationship to another, or expecting your second child is going to be the same as the first, or, those kinds of expectations. Giving a break in that really, it takes time, it takes some money, but it's actually really in the long run going to be wiser.
I think this has to be our last question too, because we're getting close to our.
From Kathy Helzer. So we actually have clarification, 150 possible pledging units and 54 have made a pledge so far. And this is a Meredith Cornett editorial. When I think of myself as a pledging unit, I don't feel particularly generous. When I think of myself as a generous person, member of the congregation who gives from her heart, I'm liable to be a lot more generous. Anyway, point of clarification.
It's a marketing change.
Yeah.
But just clarification.
No, actually, I think last year was about 130 pledgers. So I'm sorry, 130 deeply engaged individuals and couples who made generous gifts to the congregation. Jan.
I tried to ask this before and I didn't do it very well. So we know what we had last year, but what's the pool of possible? How close are we to having everybody? I mean, when I was on the board and thinking about this kind of stuff, I want 100%, you know, I don't want 30% or 50%. I want 100. How, you know, where are we in that? I guess I'd encourage people to think about that, even if trying to address those engaged members in any amount. I always encourage that MPR. It's any amount. It's the act of pledging that's important. It's not the amount. So that's my view.
Jim, this has to be the
I
last.
just want to clarify one thing, because I don't understand. If we look at the fixed expenses, we have ministerial staff. And looking at that number and then support staff. I'm guessing that in ministerial staff, that includes lifespan.
I believe
and
it does.
administrative.
Yeah, you're
It's
correct.
2 people
Yeah.
in there, plus expenses.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
catch that. Thanks for that.
So the ministerial staff is music, lifespan, and pastor. Is that what you're saying?
Okay.
All the ones that deal with programming are purpose and programming. The other thing, administrative. Editorial.
Well, thank you.